Imagine it's late afternoon, you are home alone, and suddenly you feel a tightness in the middle of your chest. It isn't a quick twinge that comes and goes, it's a weight, a pressure that won't pass, and with it comes a cold sweat on your forehead, unlike any sweat you've felt before, and a strange sense that something is wrong. In that instant, the most frightening thought of your life crosses your mind. If this ever happens to you, there is a single action that matters more than all the others, and it must come before anything else. Call your local emergency number immediately. Don't wait to see if it gets better. Don't go first to call a relative in the other room. Don't take a home remedy hoping it's just indigestion. Call first. Because if it is the heart, every minute of waiting is heart muscle that is lost and does not come back. And the person who reaches the hospital still within the first minutes is precisely the one with the greatest chance of recovering fully, instead of living forever with an after effect that changes their whole life. And before we go on, I need to make this very clear. With all seriousness, this video is only informational and educational, made so that you know the signs and know when to seek help. I am not a doctor. Nothing here replaces the evaluation of a health professional, and in the face of any symptom, the right thing to do is always to seek care and talk to your doctor. That said, let me explain why I decided to gather everything I'm about to share here, because it changes the way you'll watch these next minutes. Over time, researching and listening to the accounts of families, I've noticed that most people don't lose their lives for lack of intelligence or care. They lose them because they hesitate, because they rationalize, because they confuse the signs with tiredness or with something they ate, and let slip precisely the window in which acting fast would have made all the difference. According to public health estimates, hundreds of thousands of people go through a cardiac event every year in the United States alone, and a huge share of these tragedies has to do with delay in recognizing what was happening. So throughout this video, I'll show you 3 things that can literally change the outcome of a day like that. First, the signs the heart sends before an attack, including those atypical symptoms that especially affect women over 60 and that are far too easy to ignore. Second, the 2 moments of the day when the heart is most vulnerable, one in the morning and one at night. And the silent habits that raise the risk while you don't even notice. And third, the foods that are, day after day, building or destroying the arteries that keep your heart alive. Stay until the end, because the most important sign of all is also the most ignored, and you'll understand why recognizing it in time can be the difference between a scare and a loss. And tell me now in the comments, so I know you're here, did you already know these signs before this video? Write yes or no down below. Let me start with the signs every adult should know by heart, because this is where most people fail, not for lack of care, but because a heart attack almost never looks like what the movies taught us to expect. On screen, it's always dramatic. The person grabs their chest, falls backward, and passes out at once. In real life, especially after 60, it usually begins in a much more subtle way, much more ambiguous, much easier to confuse with something else entirely. And it's precisely that ambiguity that creates the danger, because it leads the person to wait, to observe, to attribute everything to tiredness or indigestion while time passes. The best known sign is a pressure, a pain, or a tightness in the middle of the chest. And notice that most people don't describe it as a thin, localized twinge, but as a weight, a compression, or a burning sensation that simply won't go away, unlike any discomfort the person has ever felt before in their life. Often this sensation doesn't stay only in the chest. It spreads to the left arm, not like a light tingling, but like a weight, as if the arm were heavy and not responding properly. It can rise to the jaw, with a sensation many describe as an unbearable toothache in the lower jaw, and it can go to the neck and the back. And it doesn't stop there, because these signs almost always come with others that reinforce the alert and that you need to keep in mind. A cold sweat that appears suddenly on the forehead without explanation, different from the sweat of heat or effort. Many describe it exactly like that, as a sweat that isn't normal, an intense nausea, an urge to vomit that comes out of nowhere, without any clear cause in what the person ate, and a shortness of breath out of proportion when you feel the air won't come even though you're at rest, having made no effort at all. The point I most want you to take from this topic is this: when two or more of these signs appear at the same time, the chest tightness, the pain that spreads, the cold sweat, the nausea, there is no room to hesitate, and the right thing to do is to call emergency services immediately before anything else. Don't wait for the discomfort to pass. Don't wait for a relative to arrive. Don't take an antacid betting that it's your stomach. Because if it is the heart, every minute counts. And if it isn't, the only cost will have been an emergency call that wasn't necessary. An absolutely small price next to the risk of waiting when you should have acted. Keep these classic signs well in mind because they are the alphabet of the heart. But there is a group of people in whom the heart speaks a completely different language, and ignoring that difference has already cost lives that could have been saved, and that is exactly what I need to talk to you about now. There is an aspect of heart attack signs that is absolutely critical and that almost never gets the attention it deserves. The heart doesn't always warn with that classic picture we've just seen. Often it speaks a different language, quieter, easier to confuse with something else entirely, and this is true for both men and women. In men, especially after 60, an attack doesn't always arrive with the strong, obvious chest pain. It can show up as a shortness of breath when climbing a flight of stairs that used to be easy, a vague chest discomfort the person insists on calling tiredness, a general unwell feeling with cold sweat that many confuse with weakness or with something they ate, or a pain that appears in the arm, the shoulder, or the jaw with no chest pain alongside it. Because the image everyone carries in their head is of the man clutching his chest and collapsing. The man who feels these more subtle signs tends to minimize them, to tough it out, to wait for them to pass, and that delay is precisely what does the damage. And here I want to raise a special alert for women over 60, because in them this difference tends to be even more pronounced, and ignoring it has already cost lives that could have been saved. In older women, instead of the strong chest pain, it's common for an intense and unexplained tiredness to appear, coming on suddenly and making no sense given the little the person has done, not the normal weariness of a long day, but a deep exhaustion. There also appears a pain in the stomach region or the upper belly, which imitates a case of gastritis so well that many people take an antacid and wait for it to pass, while the heart quietly cries for help. Sometimes it's just a diffuse unwell feeling, a dizziness that seems tied to fatigue, or that vague sense that something is wrong that the person can't even describe. Studies on heart health have documented that, on average, women take more than half an hour longer than men to ask for help during an attack, and much of that delay comes precisely from this more atypical nature of the symptoms. When the heart cells are dying, an extra half hour is an eternity. That's why the rule I share with everyone, man or woman, is simple and non-negotiable. If you feel two or more of these signs at the same time, especially if they are sensations you have never felt that way before, call emergency services immediately. Don't wait to get better. Don't wait for someone to arrive. Don't bet that it's your stomach. And whether you are a man or a woman, share this video with someone you love, because this simple information may be exactly what's missing on the day it counts. But recognizing the signs in the moment is only half the story, because the heart sends messages long before, in the weeks beforehand, with small signs that almost everyone ignores because they seem too trivial. And it's about those early warnings that I need to talk to you now. There is a category of signs that deserves special attention and that almost no one takes seriously: the warnings the heart sends in the weeks or even the days before an attack, as if it were asking for help in advance. The problem is that almost everyone ignores these messages because they seem too small to deserve attention. And it's exactly because they seem trivial that they become so treacherous. Let me give you the main ones for you to keep in mind. Brief episodes of shortness of breath when climbing a staircase or a slope you used to climb with no problem at all, and that suddenly started leaving you winded. An unexplained tiredness that shows up in activities that were always easy for you, as if the body were demanding more effort than it should for simple tasks. A vague discomfort in the chest that lasts a few minutes and then disappears completely so quickly that you almost forget it happened. Occasional palpitations, that heart that races or skips for an instant, which the person almost always attributes to stress, to coffee, or to a poor night's sleep. Each of these signs, alone and in isolation, may even have a harmless explanation, but when they start appearing together or repeating, they stop being coincidence and become a message worth listening to. And here is the point that changes everything in this topic. Those early warnings are, in fact, a rare opportunity, perhaps the most valuable in this whole video. Because recognizing the signs in the moment of the attack is acting when the problem has already arrived, but noticing these messages in the weeks before is the chance to investigate and act sooner, to perhaps keep the attack from happening at all. This is especially important for those over 60 who carry risk factors like high blood pressure, diabetes, a family history of heart problems, or the habit of smoking. If that's your case, and if you've been noticing some of these signs lately, the message I give you is simple. Don't ignore it, don't normalize it, don't put it off. Take it to your doctor and describe clearly what you've been feeling, because that conversation can be the difference between a calm, preventive investigation and an emergency that could have been avoided. I need to reinforce, as I did at the beginning, none of this replaces a professional evaluation. This video exists so that you know what to watch for and have the courage to seek help in time, and not so that you try to diagnose anything yourself. So tell me now in the comments, honestly, have you felt any of these signs in the past few weeks and ended up attributing them to tiredness or stress? Write it down below, because your answer may be more important than it seems. And now that you know what the heart says before and during an attack, I need to show you something almost no one knows. There are two specific moments of the day when your heart is in greater danger, and you're probably going through both of them with no protection at all. Most people who worry about their heart focus almost everything on what happens during the day: the food, the walk, the medication, and completely ignore two moments that are, for the heart, the most delicate of the entire 24-hour cycle. And the first of them is the morning, more specifically, that first hour after you wake up. What almost no one knows is that even before you open your eyes, the body is already going through an intense transition. A hormone tied to waking rises naturally to prepare you for the demands of the day, which is great and useful, but which, in a more mature body, creates a peak of vulnerability that no other moment of the day repeats with the same force. Add to that the fact that after hours of sleeping without drinking anything, the blood is thicker, more concentrated, which demands more effort from the heart to pump it. It's no coincidence that most cardiac events in older people happen precisely in that morning window, between waking and mid-morning. It's the body's biology responding to a set of conditions that all line up at the same time, creating the highest risk period of the entire day. And what's most striking is how a simple gesture can help soften it. The easiest and best known habit to help with that morning transition is to leave a glass of room temperature water on the nightstand before sleeping and drink it as soon as you wake up, still lying down, before even sitting up in bed. It's a 30-second gesture that helps the body rehydrate after the night, and that many people have never done simply because no one explained why it matters so much. And along with it, one more care. When you get up, don't jump out of bed all at once. Sit on the edge for a few seconds, breathe calmly, let the body adjust before standing up and demanding that the heart pump against gravity after hours lying flat. Now, the second dangerous window is the night, and this one is even more silent because many people sabotage their own rest without noticing. During sleep, the heart finally slows down, the beats drop, the pressure lowers. It's the only period of true rest the heart gets in 24 hours. But this rest only happens properly under certain conditions, and two modern habits disturb it greatly: the blue light from phone, tablet, and television screens in the 2 hours before bed, which harms the production of melatonin and deep sleep, and very heavy meals close to bedtime, rich in fat and salt, which force the heart to work double at exactly the hour it should be resting. Swapping the screens for something calmer and avoiding a heavy dinner late at night are two gifts you give your heart while you sleep. But I deliberately saved for the next topic what may be the most powerful factor of all in the long run, the thing that, 3 times a day, is building or destroying the very arteries that keep your heart alive. We've reached the factor that 3 times a day silently builds or destroys the arteries that keep your heart alive. And I'll start with the good part, with the foods that appear most consistently as allies of the heart. But first, an honest word. For decades, we kept spinning from villain to villain. Now it was cholesterol, now fat, now carbohydrates, and that confusion made many people give up on understanding and simply eat what they'd always eaten. What we now know more clearly is that it isn't an isolated nutrient that decides your risk, but the pattern of what you eat over time. And within that pattern, some foods stand out. The first group is fatty fish, salmon, sardines, tuna, mackerel, rich in that good kind of fat, omega-3, associated in many studies with heart health. Research institutions point to regular consumption of fatty fish, something around 2 servings a week, as one of the dietary habits with the greatest positive impact on the heart of those past 60. Then come the berries: strawberry, blueberry, raspberry, full of compounds that help the vessels stay flexible. Whole oats, with their fiber that helps balance cholesterol and blood sugar after meals. And nuts, like walnuts and almonds, which bring good fats and vitamin E that protect the cells. And there's one food that deserves a paragraph all to itself, because it's the star of the dietary pattern with the most evidence of protection for the heart: extra virgin olive oil, the heart of the so-called Mediterranean diet. It carries natural compounds with properties that help reduce inflammation in the vessels, and it's frequently pointed to as one of the pillars of the way of eating that most protects the arteries over a lifetime. Using it in place of less healthy fats day to day is one of those simple swaps that add up in your heart's favor. But I want you to understand the spirit of the thing, because that's what truly changes the result. It's not about finding a magic superfood that solves everything on its own, but about building, meal after meal, a pattern that works in your favor. A more colorful plate with more vegetables and fruit, more fish and less fried food, more real food and less packaged food. It's the repetition of these small right choices that builds healthier arteries over the months and years. And, as I promised at the beginning, I'll reinforce it frankly: this is not a prescription. It's information for you to talk better with your doctor or a nutritionist, especially if you have any health condition or take medication. Tell me now in the comments, do you usually include fatty fish like salmon or sardines in your diet? Write it down below. Because while on one side there are these foods that build your heart, on the other there is a group that does the opposite, corroding the arteries in silence. And it's about those that I need to warn you now in the last topic. Now we need to talk about the other side, the foods that appear most consistently as accelerators of risk for the heart, those that day after day slowly corrode the arteries in silence. And the first group, the one that worries me most, is processed meats, bacon, sausage, hot dogs, ham, bologna, salami, they tend to bring three problems at once. First, the preservatives used to cure them, which inside the body turn into substances that attack precisely the inner layer that keeps the arteries flexible and healthy. Second, the enormous amount of sodium, which pushes on the vessels and raises the blood pressure in a silent and progressive way over the years. And third, the fats that promote inflammation in the vessels. Exactly the process that contributes to the formation of those plaques that further down the road can trigger an attack. I'm not saying you need to cut everything forever and never eat a piece of bacon again in your life. I'm saying that when these foods stop being the exception and become a daily habit, they turn into one of the surest investments against your own heart. And alongside them comes the big group of ultra-processed foods, those products with a huge list of ingredients you barely recognize as real food, full of sugar, bad fat, sodium, and additives, which together create the inflammatory environment where heart disease develops over time. And there's a final villain that deserves special attention because it's hidden in things that seem harmless: excess sugar, especially from sodas and industrialized juices. It raises the fats in the blood, promotes insulin resistance, and feeds that same silent inflammation in the vessels. And many researchers today consider it as worrying for the arteries as high cholesterol. If I could sum up this topic in a single practical sentence, it would be this: cook more at home, open fewer packages, and use ingredients you recognize as real food. Because every meal prepared at home with food you recognize is in practice a small gesture of protection for your heart, as real as any other care you already take. And, once again, with all the honesty this subject demands, none of this is a prescription or a promise of treatment. It's information for you to make better day-to-day decisions and to talk with your doctor or nutritionist, especially if you have high blood pressure, diabetes, or any other condition that calls for closer follow-up. Tell me now in the comments, how often do you eat processed meats like sausage, ham, or bacon? And do you usually include fish during the week? Write it down below, because the pattern of the answers says a lot about the care the people who follow this channel have been taking with their own hearts, and it helps me understand what still needs to be said with more urgency. You started this video perhaps not knowing exactly what to watch for in your own body, and now you know. And that difference can determine whether a hard day ends in a scare or in a loss that changes life forever. You know the classic signs: the chest tightness that won't pass, the pain that spreads to the arm, to the jaw, to the back, the cold sweat, the nausea, and the shortness of breath that appear without explanation. You know the heart speaks a different language in many people, especially in women over 60, with that strange tiredness and that stomach pain that mislead and delay help. You know the warnings that come before, in the weeks beforehand, too small to seem important and too valuable to be ignored. You know which are the two most dangerous windows of the day: the morning, with the body in transition, and the night, with the screens and the heavy dinner sabotaging the heart's rest, and the simple gestures that help you get through them more safely. And you know which foods build and which corrode the arteries that keep your heart alive. But there is an enormous difference between knowing and being prepared, and that difference has everything to do with what you do in the next few minutes, now that the information is still fresh. Before anything else, let me reinforce, with the seriousness the subject deserves, this video is only educational and informational. I am not a doctor, and nothing here replaces the evaluation of a professional. In the face of any symptom, the right thing to do is to call emergency services and seek care. That said, I need to make one request from the bottom of my heart, because information that stays stored saves no one. What saves is information that reaches the right person before the moment, and not after, when it's already too late to learn what should have been said before. So do one concrete thing now. While you read these words, Pick up your phone and send this video to someone you love. A relative who lives alone, a friend over 65, your mother, your father, someone whose heart you want to protect with the same care you'd protect your own. Not tomorrow, now, because you don't know who will need this information this week. And answer me 3 quick things down in the comments, because I truly want to hear from you. First, which of these signs or habits surprised you the most? The one you didn't know and that changes what you'll do from now on? Second, write the first name of the person you're going to send this video to, because saying out loud who you want to protect is the strongest commitment there is. And third, tell me what part of the world you're watching from and how old you are, because the diversity of people who reach this channel amazes me. If this video helped you, leave your like, because it helps this information reach more people before an emergency and not after. Subscribe to the channel and tap the bell so you don't miss the next video, where I'll show you the 5 silent signs the body sends weeks before a heart attack and that most people ignore completely. Take care of your heart. It works for you every minute of every day, asking nothing in return. Start today. Start tonight. Start with the commitment you're going to write down below in the comments.